Welcome to INST 111, our orientation seminar for non-traditional students. During this course, we're going to focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a way to help you get more familiar with Virginia Wesleyan University Global Campus, habits that will help you be successful in all your courses, and to help you learn more about sustainability. I'm Dr. Maynard Schaus. I'm a professor of biology and environmental science at Virginia Wesleyan University. I'm currently serving as the graduate program director, kind of overseeing all our graduate programs and working toward developing new ones. This is my 25th year at Virginia Wesleyan University. I'm passionate about sustainability and the environment. I really want to convey that to our students, and I'm glad to be able to have that as a focus of this course. I'm currently serving as a board member for the Elizabeth River Project, so a few times in this course I'll give you these examples of things that the Elizabeth River Project is doing to protect the environment locally, such as planting marshes and restoring habitats and removing pollution from our local river. And just kind of as an aside, I like bird watching. I don't get to do it as often as I would like to, but I really enjoy getting connected with nature. At their core, I would say that environmental problems are interdisciplinary and interconnected. They're always complicated. They always tie several things together. And so we have to kind of take that approach to really understand them. I would say that you can boil all environmental problems down to these three things: population, resource abuse, and pollution. These would be the three root causes of all environmental problems. So deforestation, climate change, over-harvest of fisheries, hunger, poverty, all of these can tie back to one of these three issues. And these three issues kind of interrelate with each other as well, so that the environmental impact of a country is a product of its population size and the per capita resource abuse and pollution, the amount of resources used by the average person, the amount of pollution generated by the average person. That times the population gives you the total environmental impact. So if we look at these three examples, the United States, the Netherlands, and India, you can see that the United States has the largest per capita ecological footprint. So this would be the amount of area needed to support our level of resources that we use. So it would be cropland, it would be forest land that can help to support timber production, all of the land that we need. And this is 9.6 hectares per person. A hectare is 100 meters by 100 meters, so it's kind of like 2 football fields, just about in size. You can see that in the Netherlands they use less, have less of an ecological footprint per person, and in India it's substantially less, 0.8 hectares per person needed. They're eating lower on the food chain, typically utilizing fewer resources. But in India, the population is over 3 times the population of the United States. So when you look at the total ecological footprint, they're a little more similar. The United States still is larger because of a sizable population times that per capita ecological footprint per person, but India's overall impact is much larger, just simply because they have over 1 billion people. The Netherlands has a lower ecological footprint. They're a developed nation. They have a modest to large ecological footprint per person, but such a small population. So the two population times the per capita effect will give you the total ecological footprint. This brings us to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals that the 193 countries of the United Nations agreed to in 2015. So we all agreed to cooperate together ultimately to make the world a better place by doing these 17 things there: fighting hunger, fighting poverty, working for clean water, equality, education, affordable clean energy, climate action, protecting life on land, life in the water, and have responsible consumption and production. So all 17 of these things interrelate together, and we'll see some examples of that as we go through this course. Now, this relates to a concept that called the triple bottom line: promoting people, promoting prosperity, and the planet, whether it's the United States Environmental Protection Agency supporting this grant that our students got to take part in, working on a project that was designed to help people promote prosperity and a livable planet, or companies might manage for the triple bottom line. Yes, they want to make a profit, but they also want to treat their people well, and they want to have a positive impact on the planet. So that's this concept of P3, or the triple bottom line. Since that point in time, it's been expanded to be the 5 Ps: people, prosperity, the planet, and then adding in peace and partnerships. It's awfully hard to work for environmental sustainability in a war-torn nation. So you have to have a certain level of peace, and you have to have an inclusive society where everyone is valued. And then partnerships. This is a case where government is working with non-government organizations, and where different countries are working together, different organizations are working together, maybe working with corporations in order to try to protect the environment. So the 5 Ps includes people, prosperity, and the planet, but it adds in peace and partnerships, and we'll get to those things near the end of the course. One of your videos that's assigned for this week describes this as the Sustainable Development Goals wedding cake. So in the same way that a wedding cake is really, really broad on the bottom, and the tiers, the levels get smaller as you get higher and higher, and you have to have a good foundation to support everything that's above it. In the same way, the Stockholm Resilience Center argues that the biosphere and the environments of the planet are the base of this wedding cake. We have to protect life on land, life in the water. We have to provide good water sources and sanitation, and realistically address climate action in a way that's going to protect the environment of the world. That then can protect and support society, which is located above it. And it's those 8 sustainable development goals that relate to our society: no hunger, no poverty, equality, education, peace, justice, and cooperation, livable cities, affordable clean energy, good health and well-being. If we can support that and have a good, fair, just society, then we can support a green economy where we support green, livable cities, responsible consumption, responsible production, and we can have an economy that thrives. They place the partnerships at the top of this, and it kind of ties everything together because you have different elements of society cooperating together, both to protect the environment and to yield economic growth. So this is the SDG wedding cake concept, and one of your videos will expand on this more. Now, I want to kind of frame this with a historical look at environmental issues. 2 environmentalists in the early 1900s that kind of really led these ideas of conservation and preservation are John Muir and Gifford Pinchot. John Muir was an environmentalist, an author, and kind of a wild man living out, hiking through the Sierras. And he believed very strongly in preservation, that you should set an area aside and not utilize it, that it has value by itself, and we have to protect the wild places in our world. In contrast, Gifford Pinchot believed in conservation. We need to use things sustainably, but we need to use them, he would argue. And conservation implies wise use. That he, as a forester, he was a forester and the governor of Pennsylvania. He would say that you need to cut down the trees, but in a way that you're going to continually be able to cut them down. And that's his idea of conservation, that we would continually be able to use these resources, and those ecosystems would continually provide for society. So a sustainable use of a forest resource might be cutting 1/3 of the area in 1 year and then planting trees so that the trees would grow back. But it might take them 30 years to reach maturity. So 10 years later, you could cut strips 2 and 5. And then you have 1 and 4 regenerating at that time. You replant 2 and 5. And then 10 years later, you come back and you harvest strips 3 and 6. By that time, 1 and 4 have almost gotten to maturity. 2 and 5 are starting to mature. And it might take the pine trees 30 years to grow back and fully restore the forest that was there. And at that time, you can then recut the ones that you have planted. So this is an example of sustainable use of forest resources. However, what about the other functions besides just growing trees? The preservationists would argue that a forest is a habitat, that it provides for all the living things in the forest. And the forest is a diverse thing. It's not just pine trees, but it might be a mix of a dozen or 24 species of trees, and many, many animals that live there as well. This is home to those organisms, and they can't all thrive in a highly managed, regularly disturbed forest. So we need to think about, what are we harvesting it for? What are we protecting it for besides just to harvest and to utilize it, and figure out what the overall plan is for that, the sustainable use of that forest resource, and one that considers both the living things there as well as needs that society has for these resources. Another good example is fisheries. This is my wife and I at the Ocean View Fishing Pier, our local fishing pier on the Chesapeake Bay. And you might think about fisheries as a sustainable resource. You can harvest them, and that lowers how many fish are in the bay, but then the fish can reproduce, the fish can grow and increase in size and abundance, and then you can continue to harvest them. As long as you don't harvest too many, you can harvest these kinds of fish for many, many years. And all the fish that we caught here that are pictured are ones that can be harvested sustainably from the bay, because recreational fishery doesn't over harvest them to the point at which there are so few that they're not able to reproduce. So if it's done properly, a sustainable fish harvest can continue indefinitely. And there have been some notable cases where fish have been over-harvested, and then there's few spawning individuals left to reproduce and replenish the population. Or if they take a long time to grow to maturity, then that might be a non-sustainable use of these populations. So overall, the Sustainable Development Goals are interrelated with each other. So a good example of this is this week's one, clean water and sanitation. Clearly, it's tied to life below the water. If you're treating water sources well and not letting them get contaminated, you're going to protect the living things that are there, as well as human use of those water resources. A couple of the videos that I've assigned talk about this also in terms of gender equality. In some countries, it's women that fetch the water, and they might spend 3 hours a day hauling 40 pounds of water back and forth between the well and their house. This is an unfair treatment of women where that's their job, and it reduces the amount of time that they have to pursue a quality education. So in this way, several of these things can be interrelated. As we consider this course, I want you to think about the different goals. We'll look at different themes each week, and I want you to think about how the different goals are interrelated with one another. Thanks. I look forward to seeing you in the Zoom session, and I look forward to seeing your contributions to the discussion board postings. Don't forget to do the quiz at the end of this model. Have a good week.